Semi-retired Bob here. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today we're going to talk about grease, the dark side of carnivore. But before we get into today's topic, let's say hello to a few people. Rick is waiting on his engine. Looks like tomorrow's the day. And Paul is here, asked what engine it is. And it's a 7.3 diesel, which is one of the best diesel engines ever made. They last a really long time. I believe it's for his truck. It's been sitting in his driveway for a while, but if that's not right, let me know. And Josephine is here. Looks like the mama duck came back, so I let them go near the golf course. They should like living there. And John is here. Just finished 2 cans of sardines in olive oil for dinner. This is day 1 of a 5-day sardine fast. Want to join me? No. You can have my share of those sardines. I had them mixed up in butter. Was nice. Everything tastes better with butter. Everything always tastes better with butter. Yes, indeed. If this engine is good, it will restore my freedom. I hope to live stream the event tomorrow morning. That'd be awesome. Yes, it is for his truck. And Brian is here. Greetings from New Zealand. Hello. I hope you're having a good day. And Elizabeth has arrived. Hello, Elizabeth. I hope you're having a good day as well. Now, I have a kind of a unique solution, but I'm hoping that you guys will have other solutions as well that might help someone else. Because as you all know, they sell those splatter screens to put over top of your skillet while you're cooking stuff. I hate those. They are impossible to clean. They're just no. You could soak them for hours in soapy hot water and they still won't come clean. So what I have that I do, now granted, because I do it this way, I have to clean my stovetop more often. But I have a 10-inch cast iron skillet and I have a lid from a 12-inch skillet. And what I do when I'm cooking is I set the lid over top of the cast iron with one end of it propped up on the handle of the cast iron. So it doesn't seal tight to the top. But the condensation and grease will splatter up against the clear glass lid. And then it will leak out on both sides, but on the stovetop itself. So I have to clean the stovetop, but it doesn't splatter all over the place, so that I have to clean the entire stovetop and the microwave sitting next to it and the back of the oven and the oven hood and on the floor. It doesn't get everywhere. And if I'm cooking something that's especially fatty, like my 7327 ground beef, I'll just take a couple of paper towels and lay those next to the burner so that as the grease drops off of the skillet lid, it gets soaked up more by the paper towels. I've seen some interesting things out there, though. Let me know if you guys have heard of these. One of the homestead channels that I follow was talking about how when they cook something that leaves grease in the skillet, they dump oatmeal in on top of it, dry oatmeal, and the oatmeal soaks up the grease. Then they collect all that and they go out and scatter it around the yard because birds seem to really like it. And then I've seen, I don't know how eco-friendly it is or anything, but I've seen a chemical that they sell in Japan that when you're done cooking, you sprinkle this chemical into the grease and it solidifies it into this big, like, pancake looking like grease disc, and then you just peel it out and throw it away. So those are the things that I've been doing and I've been looking at. So let me know in the comments what you do with grease, because as we all know, as carnivores, grease on the stovetop is probably the biggest battle that we fight, because, well, we don't ever cook other stuff. We always are just cooking meat. And, if you live someplace like Rick, where you can go out in the backyard and throw it on the open fire to cook it every day, there's not a big problem to worry about. But if you're like me, and, it is actually nice out there today. It's up to almost 16 degrees, which is a lot warmer than it has been, but I still don't want to go out in the backyard and light up the grill and cook food in the backyard when it's 16 degrees outside. So let me know what you think, and let's get back to some comments here. Rick says, I fry daily, and the lard and tallow rarely escapes the pot. The more fat in your pot, the less likely it is to escape. Yeah, but I don't have great big pots full of that kind of stuff. But I see, because you do frying in, yes, you've got a big pot full of grease, but the pot is still twice again as high as what the grease is. And I can see that as being a good thing, but I primarily cook in a skillet. I don't have a big pot. But it's good to know that you don't have to deal with a lot of grease the way you do it. Keto Carney Cajun is here. Happy Friday, Bob. Nice to be back in the 40s. So you are home again. You survived the Vermont weather, and now you're back down to where it's semi-warm in the New Orleans area. I have gas stove. Paper on the stove is a bad idea. Yeah, I have electric. I can see where having paper towels on your gas stove could be a bad idea. There's no grease in my kitchen. It's on my car. Any escaped lard or tallow can be sprinkled with washing soda and water, and it becomes soap. Okay. And Wendy says, hello, just getting here. Hi, Wendy. Glad you made it. And Running Tap says, if you hadn't been a truck driver, what else might you have done? Well, besides being a truck driver, I've also managed a miniature golf course for, well, I've worked there off and on for 34 years. But I was the manager there for several years, back when he used to have 2 locations here in town. And I probably would have stuck with that. I would not have done retail, because I did that one winter, the worst winter of my life, because back when I was just working for the miniature golf course, I would take whatever job came along during the winter. And a friend of mine managed a Kmart at the time and talked me into working the holiday season in his electronics department. Worst mistake of my life. People showing up to places like Kmart and Walmart and all the other retail places from Black Friday till the day before Christmas. These people are just insane. I never understood it, because I don't get like that when I go out shopping. But the one thing I remember, and now this was back when a 19-inch color TV was a pretty big deal. And they were normally selling at this time for about $180 for a 19-inch color TV. And I spent one full day building this great big display of 19-inch color TVs that were going to be on Black Friday sale for $89. And I stacked up probably 300 of these things in a great big pyramid. They were gone in about 20 minutes. and the store opened at 4 o'clock in the morning on Black Friday. And people were just pushing and shoving to get there. It's crazy. I don't understand it, but yeah, retail, worst job ever. Any of you out there working retail, more power to you, because I absolutely despised it. I did stay for the whole Christmas season because I'd given my word that I would work for him that Christmas season. But the day before Christmas, he's like, well, you're done for the year. You want me to put you on the list for next year? And I'm like, no, I won't be back next year. Sorry. I use a skillet for burgers and eggs and still no big mess. Well, you're better at it than I am, Rick, because you've been cooking like that for decades. I've been doing it for not quite 3 years. So, but yeah, when I use a skillet, I get splatter all over the place, and I choose not. Like I said, those screens that you can buy for on top of skillets, those things are just a nightmare to clean. So I came up with the glass lid idea. I use my air fryer quite a bit, and it's enclosed so the grease stays contained. Yeah, I do like air fryers for that because the mess stays in it. And if you've got the kind that you can put the little paper liner in, that's even better. Because, well, like I have a roast in the oven right now, and to keep from having to scrub on the pan, I put parchment paper down on the pan before I set the roast in the oven. And that way, after I take the roast out and let it sit for a little while and then take the roast off of the pan, what grease is left on the parchment paper, I can just let it sit there for a couple hours and it solidifies up, and then I can just roll the grease up in the paper and throw it away. I'm pretty excited about this roast because it's almost 3 pounds. I'm sure I won't eat it all. I'll probably eat about 2 pounds of it and have an extra pound of roast with my hamburger tomorrow. But yeah, I went up just before I went live. It had been in the oven for about 3 hours on 250 to bring the whole thing up to temperature. I have the fat cap up on it. And just before I went live, I went upstairs and cranked the heat up on the oven to hopefully get it nice and crispy around the outside. And then it should still be nice and juicy and tender on the inside. I'm looking forward to that roast today. Paul says, I have a 12-inch carbon steel fry pan with a vented glass lid. A 4-pack of Dollar General $1 tissue wipes it clean. Okay. Yeah, I'm amazed how people act at sales. Yeah, I don't understand it. I was exposed to Black Friday that one time, and I've seen the crowds on TV, and I've just never wanted to save $30 bad enough to go stand in line at 3 o'clock in the morning to be one of the first people in a store and then get pushed because everybody behind me wants to get in the store too. I've worked in a restaurant or retail, never worked in a restaurant or retail, thankfully. It was landscaping and construction. I did work in a restaurant, again, one of those winters. Two of my boss's friends, who are now both friends of mine as well, they had a Greek restaurant, and I loved Greek food. So they're like, hey, Bob, since the miniature golf course is about to close for the winter, you want to come hang out at the Greek restaurant, take some orders, wait some tables? And I'm like, sure, why not? They didn't pay very much, and I didn't really like it, except I got food for working there too. And gyros and fries. Now, of course, that's terrible for you, especially on Carnivore, because Carnivore, fries are not Carnivore. And the pita and all the other stuff they put on the gyro. Gyro meat is actually Carnivore, but that was that was much better than working in retail. Actually, the best job I ever had lasted for 3 or 4 winters. There was a gas station out on the corner of the property, because the miniature golf course was a really big operation where I was at. And we had a huge parking lot. And there was an old empty building on one side that used to be the House of Pies. And it was the game room for the miniature golf course for a while. But there was nothing in it since I started working there back in late 90. There was a Burger King on another side of the parking lot, and there was a gas station, a car wash over there. And then out on the corner was a gas station. Well, Dwayne, the guy who's still my mechanic that I go to, he's not there anymore at that station. He's given up on gasoline and is just running a auto repair shop. But he asked me if I wanted a job, and the big scam of the whole thing was that he was an Amoco station, and at the time he got extra money back from Amoco if he was 24 hours. So he hired me to go in there at 10:30. I think it was like 10:30 at night. And there was a glass cage inside, so I couldn't be robbed. And there was a buzzer on the door, so I had to let people in. And all the gas was prepaid. And it was a tiny little store. He only had like 6 or 7 kinds of candy bars and maybe 15 kinds of chips and a soda fountain. It was a very tiny store inside, because most of the building was still a 3-bay shop for working on cars. And he would say, yeah, just lock the door, lock yourself in the cage. And if you fall asleep and miss some customers, I don't care, because it will technically keep us open for 24 hours. So I'm making more back from Amoco than what I'm paying you. And if you happen to be awake for a customer or two, that's okay too, but don't worry about it. That was the best winter job I ever had. I did that 2 or 3, it might have even been 4 winters in a row. That was a great job. Let's get back to the comments here. I hear a lot about Omaha steaks. Can't you get a deal so close to home? They are cheaper if you go to the Omaha Steaks stores and buy their stuff, but it's still really expensive. It doesn't sound super expensive until you realize all of their steaks are 6 or 8 ounces. So a 10 ounce, a $15 ribeye doesn't sound that expensive, but because it would take 2 or 3 of them, you're now looking at $30 to $45 a meal. They're still really expensive. They're nice for gifts for people, and they are very good steaks, but I can't afford that crap. Glass lids trap water vapor, which can reduce crispiness and make more violent frying. I don't know. My cast iron skillet always spits out grease everywhere, having the lid on it. Because I don't have it down tight, Rick, it vents. It doesn't trap and reduce the crispiness on me because I don't let it sit fully down on it, because it's a bigger lid than what the skillet would take. And one end of it is propped up on the handle of the skillet, so there's a gap all the way around that steam vents out. I let my fry screen get plugged up and it works great after that. Okay, yeah, I don't like fry screens, but if it works for you, then by all means, see, that's what you should do. I'm so excited I will again be able to use my custom-made engine cook pots. Yeah, I've seen those. If you guys haven't seen engine block cooking, Rick has a video about that where he just basically hangs a cooker on the side of the engine with food in it that he goes out and drives around, and by the time he gets home, the food is cooked. I have the only under-the-hood deep frying system. Mm-hmm. Great idea with the parchment paper. I'm trying not to put as much grease down the drain so it doesn't plug up during minus 30 temperatures every year. Yeah, and the other thing I do, because when you wash pans and utensils and all that, you're going to get some grease down the drain. Now, it's not eco-friendly, but Dawn dishwashing liquid is really good on grease. And after I'm done washing, usually about once a week, I get the water running as hot as it will go and then put the sink stopper in, let the sink start to fill, and when it gets up to about halfway full, I dump some Dawn some Dawn dish soap in it, and then let the sink fill up. And then when I've got a complete sink full of super hot water, if my hot water heater's having a rough day and it's not as hot as I'd like, I then take a skillet and fill it with water, put it on the stove, and heat that up till it's boiling. So I basically have boiling water in the sink with Dawn, and then I pull the stopper out and let that big blast of water run down the sink just to make sure the drains stay cleared out so I don't have any grease plugs. But that's what I do. But yes, in the wintertime, you have to be more careful with it because the water cools off quicker, and as it moves out of your house and out into the main sewer system, it can clog up out there. And clogs out there are a lot more expensive than if you clog something up underneath the sink. 7.3 cooked heart attack chicken. Mm-hmm. Comment: on 1 July 2025, I will have completed 4 years of low-carb eating. Most of my eating is beef, butter, and I'm guessing you got cut off there at the end of that. But yeah, I know you're coming up on 4 years. Ninja Foodie 6-in-1, game changer for steaks. Yeah, I've looked at a lot of stuff, but because I'm going to be down here in Texas struggling for power, I tend to go with the low-tech stuff. I'll have my skillet with me. I'll have a propane burner, and I'll also have a couple big bags of charcoal and the grill that I bought for cooking off grid. And when he says, I lick my plates clean. Yes, I live alone. Nothing wrong with that. I guess Bob never had a job. He has to use equipment like a skid skid. No, I've never had a job like that, Rick. I don't know anything about that stuff. In fact, I've lived most of my life. Now, I am getting better because I've been using some power tools around the house here. But we had a fire in our house my senior year in high school. And my stepdad and my stepbrothers did all of the work themselves. And they recruited me to help with certain stuff. And after about a week of that, my stepdad made the proclamation that Bob should never be allowed to use tools of any kind. So I've never really been exposed to tools that much, and certainly not heavy equipment. I've never had jobs like that, Rick. I mean, the closest I got to construction was when I was driving a truck. I did drive for a road construction company for a couple of years, but that was just driving a dump truck full of asphalt out the road, dumping the asphalt in the paver, and then going back for another load. Or once I moved out of dump trucks and got into what they call truck and pup, it's a dump truck with a long trailer on the back of it. I would just make runs to the quarry to get gravel that gets mixed up. Some of the gravel gets crushed onto the roadbed, and some of the other sizes of gravel and sand get mixed in with the asphalt mix. That's the closest I ever got to that kind of a job. Has a vent hole. Okay. If I get fat in the pipe, I used to dump lye in it. Yeah, well, because you use all those harsh chemicals, and lye does work, but Dawn is a lot safer for me to use. Bob doesn't like construction. Dozer's the easiest to learn. Skid steer's next. It's not that I don't like construction, and it's not that I wouldn't learn how to use a dozer or a skid steer, but I know I will never be able to afford those. And buying a used one is not an option, because one of the guys I follow that lives, well, from the old property, lived south of me, Sean Overton, has a channel, I believe it's called Dust Ups. He bought a dozer about a year ago, and he now knows more about dozers than he ever wanted to know, because he has spent a vast majority of his time working on the dozer instead of using the dozer. And I have no desire to get into that kind of stuff. I think we're at the end of the comments. So anybody else have any other good suggestions? Has anybody seen the stuff or heard of the chemical they use in Japan? But the one that I'm really interested in, because I think it would be good for attracting birds and things if it really does work to my desert property, dumping dry oatmeal into the grease and then scattering it out, because birds like it and other small animals might like it. That I, of course, don't want to attract mice. Well, as long as they don't hang around, and because mice attract snakes, and I really don't want snakes. But if anybody else has heard of any of these things, it would be nice to have other ideas. And like I said, in Japan, they've got that chemical they dump into the grease. I wish Dave Mack were here. He could tell. Maybe I'll ask him about that next Wednesday when I talk to him again. Here. I've spent a lot of time fixing junk as well. Mm-hmm. All you need is water to attract birds. So see, that's the problem. I don't have water. I will have water eventually, but I'm not going to certainly start off with water. Get a cat. Yeah, I will eventually, when I move down there full time, probably get a cat and a dog, maybe a couple of each. But pets in the city is just not a good idea, especially since, I'm one of these guys that I killed a fake plant once. Me taking care of pets is probably not a good idea. A cat like Milton, wild. Milton is a mad cat, yes. And Bert is here. Bert's here. I know ways to attract vultures. Yeah. Well, if you see vultures circling around my desert property, you know I've made a mistake and died on the property with a broken leg or something. But at least there won't be much to clean up afterwards. Yes, he would drive me crazy, Rick, but he is cute. Yes, indeed. Rick's cat, well, kitten is not really a cat yet, is really cute and seems to have plenty of energy. So how are the ducks doing, Rick? Are they still hanging around your yard, or have they abandoned you again? Hopefully they're hanging around the yard so you start to get some eggs again, because eggs are ridiculously expensive. Here in the United States anyway, where they've killed off a bunch of birds for some virus thing that's going around. Strange that it hasn't hit the country to the south of us or the country to the north of us. Very, very strange. I have been working all week. The ducks have disappeared again. Oh, that's too bad, Rick. That's too bad. Hopefully you can, I don't know if you can dump some duck food out and leave it there, or if duck food's the kind of stuff, the kind of duck food you use would spoil. I don't know. But hopefully you can coax some more ducks back to your yard again there, Rick. Oh, my goodness. We're up to 29 people in the chat today. That's pretty cool. Yes, I think it's really badly made up. Duck food would attract more raccoons. Now, raccoons, can those be eaten? Anybody got good raccoon? Anybody got good raccoon recipes? Are you still making plans for hiking the Appalachian Trail? Yes, but not this year. Because I got delayed on getting my property started by a year, everything has been pushed back a couple of years. I would still like to go do that. The main thing that I'm still working on, I can't really go camping on a long camp where I have to get up and down off the ground multiple times until my knees are strong enough to let me get up and down off the ground without a lot of effort. They are still slowly getting better, but it's a process, and it still takes too much effort to get up and down off the ground to hike the trail for 10 or 15 miles a day and then set up a tent and get down and sleep in a tent and then try and get back up. I don't think I'm able to do that yet. I'm hopeful that once I get down here and get things started, my property is literally on the back gate of Big Bend National Park, and there's a lot of hiking and camping trails in Big Bend. So I'm hoping to get some overnight trips from the property once I get things started down there. The first thing I have to do is get things started. People used to eat raccoons, but they eat garbage here. Okay. People call them trash pandas. All righty. Raccoon make good dog food. Okay. I can see that. But to go back up to the beginning, for those of you that came in late and want to hear about the title of today's video, Grease, the Dark Side of Carnivore. And we've had a few suggestions. Of course, Rick has no problems because he's the perfect carnivore. But we've had people talking about using air fryers that contain the grease. What I do is I have a glass lid that's bigger than my cast iron skillet. So I set that over the top of my skillet with it propped up on the handle of the skillet, so there's a gap that lets steam go out, but it still keeps the grease from splattering everywhere. Some grease does drip down out of the lid onto the stovetop, but cleaning the stovetop is much easier than having to clean the stovetop and the back of the stove and the oven, the hood, and the microwave sitting next to the oven and the counter on the other side and the floor and all of that, because grease splatters everywhere if you don't do something to keep it contained. And as I stated earlier, the screens that they make to put over a skillet to contain the grease, I don't like those because they are so hard to clean. Even if you soak them in the sink of hot water, they're still really, really hard to clean. But I made a short about it, and that's what brought this topic on today. You know, just don't forget. Now Rick probably doesn't do this because he has a gas stove and doesn't splatter grease anywhere. But for those of us with electric stoves, and we do make a mess when we're cooking, usually every couple of weeks or so, I take the stovetop apart and clean everything and then put it back together, because I did not do that for like the first year of Carnivore. And when I finally noticed how gross the drip pans underneath the burners were, I took the stovetop apart and went to clean everything, and it took me hours to scrub all of those drip pans. And of course, they were bad enough that some of the grease had gotten underneath the drip pans down on the base of the stovetop, or what would be the top of the oven. So just as a general reminder, if you're a messy cooker like I am, take the stovetop apart once every other week or so and clean it. It's much easier to do it every other week than letting it go for 6 months to a year and then having to scrub for hours to get the grease off of things. So if you have any other ideas for controlling the grease, now's a good time to get them in. We've got about 20 minutes left in the live stream or thereabouts. I've talked about grease twice. So has anybody noticed when you get out to the grocery store? I find this disturbing, and hopefully things will turn around here. If I want whatever, I don't really buy any of this kind of stuff anymore, but has anybody noticed that buying clean foods, whether it be organic produce or the no sugar added whatever, is much more expensive than the food made out of all the crap that's bad for us? I mean, I understand, because the food that's better for us is more expensive to make because they can't chock it full of all the crap ingredients. But it's kind of sad when it costs twice as much to eat healthy as it does to eat all of the junk. Now, we as carnivores don't have to deal with that as much because meat is meat. Some meat is better than others, but it's not chocked full of crap like all of the other stuff is. Oh, Bert put a comment up here. I use a universal aluminum anti-splatter lid with venting holes. Works great. Don't know if these are sold at your local shops or online. Okay. As long as it works, that sounds really good. The kind of thing that they sell here is like a really fine mesh. And unless you want to soak it in hot water and poke at it with a toothpick, you can't ever get it clean again once you start using it. And he says, I don't dump grease in the sink. I eat it. Yeah, and I do try to save it and scramble eggs in it and that kind of stuff. But between the utensils, the spatulas and the drip pans and the fork and the knife and all that stuff, you're going to get some grease in the sink, whether you want it or not. So that's the other thing that I talk about. I use Dawn dish soap, and about once a week, I fill my sink up with as hot a water as I can get, put some Dawn dish soap in it, and then pull the plunger out so a full sink full of water goes whooshing down the drain to hopefully clean the drains out a little bit. Tinfoil covers the stove and catches the splatter. It saves rinsing the cloth in the sink. We'll try the sink and Dawn dish soap trick to flush grease. Thanks for that tip. Yeah, especially if you live like Cedars does and I do in areas where it's brutally cold this time of year. As the water goes down the sink and out towards the street, it cools much quicker this time of year. So in the wintertime, I flush the sink more often than I do in the summertime. Because, it's a difference of, like the last few days, a couple of nights ago, it got down to minus 18 outside. And in the summertime, when it's 100 degrees outside, the water doesn't cool as quickly as it's going down the sink, so you don't have to do it as often. But keeping your sink free of grease is a really good idea. Slow cooking meats in the pots eliminates fat from escaping. I get it. Yes, indeed. I'm not that patient. Because I primarily eat. Sorry, I still got a little bit of a scratchy throat from when I was sick. Because 95% of my meals are ground beef, I just put that in a pot and let it fry up. And that's primarily what I use the glass lid for when I'm getting the ground beef done up, as opposed to, like today, I've got a big roast in the oven on a piece of parchment paper inside the pan to keep the grease from getting down on the pan, and roast even in the oven at a higher temperature like it's on right now because it's almost time to go eat. Roasts just don't splatter the inside of the oven. And if I could afford roasts and that kind of stuff every day, I wouldn't really have a grease problem. But since most of my meals are ground beef and I cook those in a skillet, that's where a lot of my problems come from. Paul says, I've seen those aluminum lids on Amazon. I'll have to look. And Anita, ketogenic woman, uses something on the frying pan that looks like sort of a cone. I think it's silicone. I don't remember the name of it. It keeps the grease from splattering on the stove. Good. Hello, Marilyn. I'm glad you made it today. And yeah, everybody has their own little tricks for what they do. And that's sort of what today's live stream is about, letting me know about what your tricks are, or tricks that you've seen other people use, like Anita. Oh, my throat's starting to give out just a little bit here, folks, but we're going to press on. I often cook ground beef in a pot. I don't own a pot, Rick. I have a cast iron skillet and I have a bigger skillet. I don't own a pot. I don't have any kind of a pot. I used to have a pot that was Teflon coated. When I started Carnivore, I threw that pot away. I don't own a pot. I have a skillet or an air fryer or an oven. Those, or outside on the grill. Those are my cooking options. We have been complaining about the cost of good food versus crap for years here in Nova Scotia. Yeah, it seems to be everywhere. And of course, Rick makes his own produce because he has a yard with trees. I know he has bananas and plantains. I don't know what the heck a plantain is, but I've heard him talking about those. And I think he's got a couple of other kinds of fruit that grow out in his yard. Because the only thing I really cook in a frying pan is eggs. I generally use the griddle for burgers. Yeah, I don't have a griddle. I have a skillet. That's what I have. I have a smaller skillet that's cast iron, or I have a bigger skillet that's blue something or other non-stick skillet. It's a nice big, like 14-inch skillet. So what I will sometimes do, because my small cast iron skillet, when I use the pre-made burger patties, I can only put 2 of those in there in my small skillet at a time. So I'll put 5 or 6 of them in the big skillet and get them started. And as they get close to temperature, I transfer them 2 at a time over to the cast iron skillet to brown them up so that they look nice and good. Get yourself a stainless steel pot. I've never had much luck with stainless steel, but I will probably look into it again. What I'd like to have, if I could figure out how to season it properly and keep it nice, is I'd like to have one of those cast iron Dutch ovens so that when I get down to Texas, if I have a fire, I could just set it on the fire or set it on the grill and let it go that route. And yes, you got your pots from a dump. I don't go to dumps. We'll see what happens when I get down to Texas. You know, I may get a bunch of junk from other people that are like, hey, you want this? And I'll look at it and go, I might be able to figure something out. I don't know what loquats are, but mangoes, avocados, limes, and oranges. I've heard of all the others. But yeah, like I said, Rick has a lot of fruit trees in his yard. If you're not watching Rick's channel, what are you waiting on? Because he's got a lot of good stuff. Tall Cedar says, Bob, now that I think of it, I don't use pots any longer. Also, that said, I do use a small pot for boiled eggs, but that's it. And see, I don't boil eggs myself anymore. It's such a pain in the butt to do it so that they peel. I know this is a horrible thing to admit, but from Walmart, I can order, especially right now, because the price of eggs is so high, the pre-made hard-boiled and peeled eggs haven't gone up. So I can still get a 6-pack of eggs that are boiled and peeled. So that all I have to do is open up the pack and eat them for like $2.50, which makes it $5 a dozen. Back when eggs were $2 a dozen, they were a little expensive to buy that way. But now that eggs are $5.50, $6, in some cases up to $8 a dozen, buying the $2.50 6-packs of pre-boiled and pre-peeled eggs is a lot more economical. I have a few skillets I have cooked burgers in, but I use low gas to cook slowly. And heart attack chicken is best cooked in a pot. Yes. And you have a Dutch oven that you use outside. I cook my ground beef in a non-stick aluminum skillet with butter. When it starts to brown, I dump the eggs in and stir the mix until cooked. Never have grease shower. Maybe you cook too hot. Maybe. I don't know. I've never claimed to be a great cook. I am an impatient cook. I usually turn the cast iron skillet on to medium, and that's how I do my hamburger. Sometimes if I get impatient, I turn it up a little closer to the high mark, but it's basically medium is what I cook on. So yeah, maybe it doesn't splatter as much if you cook on a lower temperature. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a great cook, but because I cleaned my stove just an hour before I made that short a few days ago about taking your stove apart and cleaning it, that's how I came up with this topic for today. Maybe I'm just a terrible cook and nobody else has problems with grease, but that's where I'm at. Maybe I do cook too hot. I don't know. Walmart eggs work? Yes, absolutely. Let's see here. Caribbean people here love to cook in a Dutch pot. I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming that's the Dutch oven kind of thing that I was talking about. The big pot that you can get that has a lid on it. Love mashed boiled eggs with 3 to 4 tablespoons of butter and some salt. Yeah, I do have a tiny little confession to make. Since I've been sick, eggs have been making me a little on the nauseous side. So for the last week and a half and continuing on through the rest of this pay cycle, because I already have my food bought, instead of having a pound of ground beef and 6 to 8 eggs, I've been having a pound of ground beef with a side of ground beef or a side of leftover roast or a side of leftover chicken. I haven't eaten any eggs in almost 2 weeks now. And part of it is because they were making me a little sick when I was sick. And part of it is the cost of eggs is so high right now. Why would I pay $4.50 or $5 for a dozen eggs? When I was buying eggs for 10 cents a piece, they made a good filler to keep my meals cheap. But now that eggs are so expensive, a second pound of ground beef is much cheaper than a dozen eggs. So that's what I've been doing with my meals lately. I use a tri-pour with my Dutch pot. I don't know. I'm assuming it says tripod. Cast iron cauldron. I have a tripod to hold the Dutch pot over the fire. And you know what I've seen, because some of those actually come with a cast iron lid on top of it. I've seen people actually bake inside of those rather than setting it in the fire or hanging it on a tripod over the fire. I've seen, not that I want to have biscuits or anything, but I've seen people take and put biscuits inside those, put the lid on it, and then take hot coals out of the fire and lay those on top of the lid and let things bake from the top. It would be interesting, since I plan on cooking primarily with charcoal when I get down to Texas, having one of those pots that after I'm done cooking up a big batch of burgers on the grill, throwing something into the cast iron pot, putting the lid on it, and then basically dumping the hot coals of the grill onto the cast iron to let something cook, might be a way of going about it. Good idea to only eat ground beef, as beef heals our cells when we're sick. We'll keep that in mind for any flu I catch. You can bake a roast in a pot. It also works for seafood and reptiles. And you can set your pot right on the charcoal. Yeah, I knew I could do that, but the idea of being able to put some of the charcoal on the lid to have heat coming from all the way around it is an interesting concept to me. But my voice is starting to give out, and we're coming up on the hour there. So if you have any last minute questions or comments, be sure and get those in. We'll give it just a moment in case somebody has any last minute questions or comments. I need another drink of water. Yeah, I pay €270 for a dozen eggs and €6 for a pound of ground beef. So I eat eggs all right. Yeah, and prices vary. Here, I can get a pound of the 7327 if I buy it in 10-pound chubs for about $3. Some weeks it's $27, $28 for the 10-pound chub, and some weeks it's 31 or 32. So it hovers right around $3 a pound for ground beef here, and eggs are well over $5 a dozen here at this right now. So yeah, it varies completely on where you're at. If you're at a point, if you're like where Bert is, and the cost of ground beef versus the eggs, even if they were making me a little bit sick to my stomach, I would probably still eat eggs with that price difference going on. And the feral grandma pops in just as we're getting ready to leave. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for stopping by. Before everybody goes, don't forget to hit the like button. No questions, but don't forget to check me out and see if I get my engine tomorrow morning. Yeah, everybody keep an eye on that, because if Rick gets his engine in, he's going to hopefully live stream the engine arriving and unloading. That'll be pretty exciting, because his new engine for his truck's supposed to be in tomorrow, which will be really cool. But I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. As I've said many times, this is my favorite hour of the week, because we get to just sit here and it feels like I'm having a conversation with you guys, even though you have to type your comments and I have to read the comments. It still kind of feels like we're just sitting here having a chat, which I really like that. This is my favorite time. Don't get me wrong, I love going out and walking and recording videos and all that, but this is my favorite hour of the week, to just sit here and talk to you guys about whatever happens to be the subject of the day. He says, I'll get the replay, minutes watched help the algorithm. And FYI, if you have a Trader Joe's near you, their prices are not going up. They just limit it to 1 dozen a day. Yeah, I do have a Trader Joe's, but it's quite a ways away, and I don't drive anywhere in the winter. The only time I start my truck and go anywhere this time of year is when I start my truck and drive to dance class. That's it. It's 2.5 miles down to dance class, so I drive about 5 miles a week during the winter. I haven't bought gasoline for my truck in months. Not because it gets great gas mileage, because I just don't go anywhere. And my truck takes a fortune to fill up. It has a 28-gallon tank on it. And that, I want to say it was back before Thanksgiving the last time I bought gasoline. It is starting to get down. I'm probably going to have to buy gas sometime in the next couple of months as summer gets here. All I have is Trader Rick's, and his ducks are MIA. I only buy 5 gallons of gas a year. Yeah, because you drive mostly diesel, and you make your own out of used cooking oil, which is awesome. I would love to be able to do that. But yeah, I was wrapping up. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. It means a lot to me that you guys hang out with me and talk to me on Fridays. But remember, get out there, be 1% better. Today, tomorrow, every day. Have a great day, folks. I'll see you in the next one.